Well, good morning, everybody. Pastor Steve here. I hope your week is going well. I hope you're also excited about being in church Sunday and worshiping Jesus, and that you are praying for God to give you an opportunity to invite someone, praying for God to give you an opportunity to share the gospel of Jesus with someone and how they can be saved, and that you're praying for people by name, and that you will bring people with you Sunday morning when you come to worship and life group. Well, today we are in Mark chapter 5, and there are two very powerful, very moving miracles of Jesus in this chapter. One in which he cast numerous demons out of a man who was just living a miserable life while he was demon-possessed, and the other, he heals the daughter, raises her from the dead of an official in the Jewish synagogue. Just two very moving miracles. And before I get to my devotion, a couple of teaching notes from these stories. Back in verse 1 of chapter 5, they came to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, into the country of the Gerasenes. Now, that is the region that is on the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee, the eastern side of the Jordan River. So the opposite side of the Mediterranean, if you will. So the Mediterranean Sea, Israel, Sea of Galilee, then on the eastern side of that going towards Syria and Jordan. And the Gerasenes was an area that was basically in southeast of the Sea of Galilee, kind of where the southern tip of the Golan Heights today and the country of Jordan come together. So that's the area. And then in verse 20, when the demon-possessed man was healed, he began telling everybody in Decapolis, it says, Decapolis, about Jesus and the things he had done for him. That was a league of 10 cities that had special status with the Romans, that Greek cities, for the most part, were located not exclusively, but mostly in what today we would think of as northwestern Jordan. And so I point that out to say that that Jesus traveled outside of Galilee and just Judea. He was in Samaria. He went over to the area that we would think of as Phoenicia. Here he's over in the area that we would think of as Jordan and possibly parts of Syria. So while Jesus didn't travel a long distance, he did get outside of the native Jewish lands, if you will. One more thought down in verse 41, when the little girl is dead and he raises her from the dead, the Bible says in verse 41, taking the child by the hand, he said to her, Talitha cum, which translated means, little girl, I say to you, get up. And of course, she was raised from the dead. Now that's an Aramaic phrase. We have in the Gospels a few Aramaic phrases. The Greek phrase, the Greek wording for that would be very, very similar. Maybe just one letter difference, actually. And I point that out because I want to ask the question, what language did Jesus speak? I mean, being the Son of God, he could speak any language he wanted, we could say, but what language did he speak? Scholars historically have mostly said he spoke Aramaic, because Aramaic was the common language that was spoken in Galilee where Jesus lived. And, Capernaum was his ministry headquarters for those 3 years. And he spent most of his ministry and most of his life in Capernaum. So it is likely that Jesus spoke Aramaic, and you see these phrases, but that's not to say it's the only language he spoke. Jesus, for instance, spent his young years in Egypt when his parents fled there after King Herod was going to have all the babies killed. And, they were warned by the angel to leave. Well, living in Egypt to communicate with foreigners there, they would have to speak Greek. So he was exposed to Greek at an early age when kids most easily learn different languages. And some of the places Jesus went to, especially over in Phoenicia and the Decapolis and some places like that, Greek was common. And it's likely that he did speak to them in Greek to some extent, and even Hebrew, because Jesus quotes the Old Testament a lot. Well, he was going to read it in Hebrew. And when you go into the Jewish synagogues, the scriptures were read in Hebrew. So Jesus, I think, probably spoke 3 languages, Aramaic, Greek, and Hebrew. And that may seem a little odd to us, but the truth is, in much of the world today, many people speak more than one language. Here in America, where most of us only speak one language, we're the oddballs. Much of the world speaks more than one language. We're one of the places where that's not true. We're not the only place, but we just, sometimes as Americans, we just assume everybody ought to meet our needs. So we go anywhere else, why don't you speak English? Anyway, Jesus was multi-language is my point. And the Bible, when they wrote it, was written in Greek. Why Greek if Jesus mostly spoke Aramaic, even though he spoke Greek and Hebrew? Why was it written in Greek? Well, Greek was the language that, it was sort of like English today. You go almost anywhere in the world today and you can find people who speak English. So it was in Greek, with Greek in much of the world in Jesus' day. And the Greek Empire and then the Roman Empire made that happen. And since the Bible, the New Testament, the Gospels and the epistles were written to a larger audience, not just those living in Palestine, then that's why it was written in Greek. And so things Jesus may have said in Aramaic were translated into Greek. Now for you and me, they're translated into English. Now my devotional thought real quick, because I spent a little more time on that than I planned to. Verses 6 and 7 in Mark chapter 5. Jesus, gets out of the boat, and this Gerasene, this man possessed by all these demons, runs up to him and falls down at his feet, and had been abusing the man. But in verse 6, seeing Jesus from a distance, the man, ran up and bowed down before Jesus, and shouting with a loud voice, he said, "What business do we," plural, "have with each other, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God, do not torment me." And as you go on and read the story, we learn that this man had a lot of demons inside him. He was possessed by many demons, and they were tormenting him terribly. But I was caught by that statement in verse 7. The demon inside the man was shouting loudly to Jesus, "What business do we have with each other, Jesus, us as demons and you? We're not on the same side." And then he called him, Jesus, Son of the Most High God. Do not torment me. It's interesting because that is very similar to what was said by a demon back in chapter 1 when Jesus healed a man who was possessed by a demon. And in verse 24 of chapter 1, here's what that demon said. "What business do we have with each other, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." Some distinctions, but yet a lot of similarities between the statements of these different demons. They knew not only who Jesus was, and remember, if demons are fallen angels, then they knew the pre-incarnate Jesus in heaven. But they knew Jesus was their enemy, and they were powerless against him. And I say that to say this, Christians, you do not need to fear the devil or his demons. We need to be conscious of his activity and that he works to tempt us and so on, but there is no reason for any true believer to be afraid of Satan or his demons. They knew who Jesus was. They called him the Son of the Most High God. You are the Holy One of God's. Hell recognizes who Jesus is, knows his deity and his power. So I reiterate, don't be afraid. The gospel of Jesus Christ is powerful. Paul in Romans chapter 1 said, "The gospel is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes." Jesus talking about the establishment of his church upon the rock of who he was as the Christ. And Matthew 16 said, "The gates of hell will not prevail against his church." And gates are part of a city wall built around a city to protect the inhabitants of the city from an approaching or attacking enemy. And it's not the gates of the church or the gates of heaven Jesus mentioned in Matthew 16. It's the gates of hell. Hell is on the defense. And when the church of Jesus Christ marches forward with the gospel of Jesus Christ, doing so in the power of God, don't fear the enemy. I get so discouraged sometimes with how many American Christians live in fear and with a defeated mindset. Man, get in touch with Jesus because you don't need to be afraid. Hell bows to Jesus. Demons bow to Jesus. Stop living in fear. And that's the sermon for today. I'll see you tomorrow as we look at the first half of Mark chapter 6. God bless you.